The rain hammered against the windows like bullets as Lena Carter pressed her hand against her still flat stomach, feeling the secret that would either save her or destroy her. In the marble hallway below, Dominic Verese's guards patrolled with military precision, unaware that the woman their boss claimed to possess was about to vanish into the storm. She had exactly 12 minutes before the security rotation changed, 12 minutes to escape the golden cage, 12 minutes before the most dangerous man in the criminal underworld discovered she was carrying his child and that she'd chosen freedom over his protection. If you're hooked, stay with me until the end of this 5-part story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far Lena's journey reaches across the world. The estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Lena had learned its rhythms over the past 8 months. The precise intervals when guards changed positions, the blind spots in the camera system, the single service entrance that remained unwatched for exactly 14 minutes during the night shift rotation. She'd memorized every detail with the patience of someone who understood that knowledge was the only currency she possessed in a world where Dominic Verese owned everything else, including her. The thought sent a familiar chill through her body as she stood before the full-length mirror in what Dominic called her room. The reflection staring back seemed like a stranger, designer clothes that cost more than she'd earned in a year as a waitress, professionally styled hair, skin that glowed from spa treatments she'd never requested. She looked like she belonged in this world of marble and money. But the small duffel bag hidden in the back of her closet told a different story. Lena reached for it now, her hand steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Inside were the essentials she'd gathered over weeks of careful planning. Cash she'd skimmed from shopping trips, a prepaid phone still in its packaging, identification documents she'd managed to keep despite Dominic's tendency to safeguard her personal items, and a small bundle of baby clothes she'd purchased during a rare unsupervised moment at a boutique 3 weeks ago. The baby clothes made it real. She was 10 weeks pregnant with Dominic Verese's child, and he had no idea. The pregnancy test had appeared positive on the same day she'd decided to leave. Lena had stared at those 2 pink lines in the bathroom of a cafe, her coffee growing cold on the table, understanding that everything had just become infinitely more complicated. She could have told him. Part of her had wanted to, the part that remembered how Dominic looked at her sometimes, like she was the only real thing in his manufactured world. But she'd seen what happened to things Dominic considered his. He protected them, controlled them, possessed them so completely that they ceased to exist as separate entities. His business partners became extensions of his empire. His properties became fortresses. His enemies became cautionary tales whispered in back rooms of restaurants he owned. And Lena had become a beautiful ghost haunting the halls of his estate, present but not really living. The baby changed everything. A child would give Dominic the ultimate reason to never let her go. She would be bound to him, not just by circumstance or fear, but by blood and biology. The cage would close permanently, lined with velvet and rationalized as protection. So she'd made her choice. Tonight, while storm clouds gathered over the Hudson Valley and Dominic attended a meeting in the city that would keep him occupied until at least 2 in the morning, Lena would disappear. She checked her watch, 11:47 p.m. The guard rotation would shift at midnight. She had 13 minutes. Moving quickly, Lena changed out of the silk nightgown Dominic had bought her and into practical clothes, dark jeans, a black sweater, running shoes. She pulled her hair into a tight ponytail and grabbed the duffel bag, taking one last look around the room that had been her prison and her refuge for the better part of a year. The king-sized bed where Dominic had taught her the difference between desire and safety. The window seat where she'd spent countless afternoons staring at the world beyond the gates, feeling like Rapunzel in a tower of her own making. The closet full of beautiful things that had never quite felt like they belonged to her. She was leaving all of it behind. The hallway was empty when she slipped out of her room. Lena had timed this perfectly. The cameras in this wing were on a rotation that created a 3-minute blind spot between sweeps. She moved quickly but quietly, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the imported Italian marble that Dominic had specifically chosen because it reminded him of his grandmother's house in Sicily. He told her that story one night, his head on her lap, his guard down in a rare moment of vulnerability. Lena had stroked his hair and listened to him talk about the woman who'd raised him after his parents died. The woman who'd taught him that family was everything and loyalty was sacred. She pushed the memory away. Sentiment was a luxury she couldn't afford. The service stairs were exactly where her mental map told her they would be, hidden behind a door that looked like part of the wood paneling. Lena's heart hammered as she descended, each step taking her closer to freedom or disaster. At the bottom, she paused, listening for voices or footsteps. Nothing. The kitchen was dark, illuminated only by the ambient light from appliances and the storm raging outside. Through the window, Lena could see sheets of rain turning the manicured grounds into a watercolor painting. The service entrance was 20 feet away. Through the mudroom and past the security panel, she'd watched the housekeeper disarm 100 times. She'd memorized the code 0827. Dominic's birthday, because for all his sophistication about security, he was sentimental about the strangest things. The panel beeped softly as she entered the numbers, and Lena held her breath, waiting for alarms to scream or lights to flood the grounds. Instead, there was a quiet click as the lock disengaged. She was out. The rain hit her like a physical force, immediately soaking through her clothes despite the jacket she'd pulled from the mudroom. Lena didn't care. She ran across the grounds, keeping to the shadows, heading for the section of wall she'd identified weeks ago as her escape route. The old oak tree that grew near it had branches strong enough to support her weight, and the wall itself had decorative stonework that created natural handholds. Climbing in the rain was harder than she'd anticipated. The bark was slick, her hands kept slipping, and the wind kept trying to tear her from the tree. But fear was an excellent motivator, and the thought of Dominic discovering her empty room pushed her upward until she was level with the top of the wall. She didn't look down. Looking down would make it real, would show her exactly how far she had to fall if this went wrong. Instead, Lena focused on the branches, on maintaining her grip, on swinging her leg over the top of the wall and finding purchase on the other side. For a moment, she straddled the barrier between Dominic's world and freedom, rain pouring down her face, wind whipping her ponytail like a flag. Behind her, the estate glowed with warm light, beautiful and terrible. Ahead, darkness and uncertainty stretched into the storm. Lena chose darkness. She dropped down the other side, landing hard enough to jar her teeth, but maintaining her footing. Then she was running, sprinting through the woods that bordered the estate, putting distance between herself and the only home she'd known since Dominic had pulled her from her shabby apartment and into his world of luxury and control. The memory came anyway, sharp and clear, despite her attempt to focus on the present. 8 months earlier, the diner's fluorescent lights had been flickering for 3 weeks, giving everyone who worked there a perpetual headache. Lena had learned to ignore it, just like she'd learned to ignore the persistent leak in the ceiling, the temperamental coffee maker, and the way her manager looked at her legs when he thought she wasn't paying attention. It was nearly midnight on a Tuesday, the dead zone between late dinner and the drunk crowd that would start filtering in around 1. Lena was wiping down tables and trying to calculate whether her tips would be enough to cover both her electric bill and her phone bill this month when the bell above the door chimed. She'd looked up and seen him, a man who clearly didn't belong in a diner with cracked vinyl booths and a menu that hadn't changed since 1987. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her car, had eyes that cataloged everything in the room within seconds, and moved with the kind of controlled grace that suggested danger wrapped in expensive tailoring. "Coffee," he'd said, sliding into a corner booth with sightlines to both entrances. "Black." Lena had brought him his coffee, noting the way his hands were scarred despite the obvious wealth, the way he sat like someone accustomed to being obeyed. She'd seen men like him before, not personally, but in the news and whispered conversations, in the way they moved through the world like they owned it, because they did. "Anything else?" she'd asked, ready to retreat to safety behind the counter. "Your name." It wasn't a question. Lena's stomach had tightened, but she'd kept her voice steady. "Lena." "Lena." He'd said it like he was tasting it, testing how it felt. "I'm Dominic. You work here every night?" "Most nights." "You like it?" The laugh had escaped before she could stop it. "Do I like working minimum wage plus tips in a diner that smells like grease and regret? It's a dream come true." Instead of being offended by her sarcasm, Dominic had smiled, a real smile that transformed his face from intimidating to almost beautiful. "Sit with me. I'm working. I'll buy out the diner for an hour. Sit." And she had, against every instinct screaming that this man was dangerous, that getting involved with someone like him was a catastrophic mistake. But there was something about the way he looked at her, really looked at her, not through her or at her body or past her to something more interesting that made her stay. They talked until 3 in the morning. He told her about growing up in Brooklyn, about building something from nothing, about the weight of legacy and expectation. She'd told him about community college classes she couldn't afford to continue, about the father who died leaving nothing but debt, about dreams she'd packed away because survival took precedence. When he'd left, he'd put a $100 bill under his empty coffee cup and told her he'd be back. He had been. Every night for 2 weeks, always taking the same booth, always ordering black coffee, always staying until her shift ended to walk her to her car. Lena had known what he was. You didn't live in the city without learning to recognize the hierarchy of power. But she'd let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could touch something beautiful without getting burned. The night he'd asked her to leave with him, she'd said yes. It was supposed to be temporary. A week in his world, seeing how the other half lived, then back to her reality with enough money to pay off her debts and maybe, finally, finish school. He'd promised her that much, and Dominic kept his promises. What she hadn't understood was that Dominic defined promises differently than most people. Yes, she could leave whenever she wanted, but why would she want to leave when he could give her everything? Safety, security, beauty, pleasure. All she had to do was stay in the rooms he provided, wear the clothes he bought, be available when he wanted her. The cage had closed so gradually that Lena hadn't noticed until the lock clicked shut. The memory faded as Lena stumbled over a root, barely catching herself before she fell. The woods were dark and treacherous, but she kept moving, driven by the certainty that stopping meant being caught. She'd planned her route carefully. 3 miles through the woods to the service road where she'd hidden a bicycle 2 weeks ago. Then 15 miles to the bus station in a town small enough that Dominic's people wouldn't think to look there immediately. A bus to Albany, another to Montreal, then across the border into Canada on foot, if necessary. Toronto was her destination, big enough to disappear in, far enough away to make tracking her difficult, and home to a community center she'd researched that helped women in crisis. She'd start there, build something new, give her baby a chance at a life that didn't involve armed guards and blood-stained money. The bicycle was where she'd left it, hidden under a tarp and covered with branches. Lena's hands shook as she uncovered it, reality crashing over her in waves. She was really doing this. She was running from Dominic Verres, a man whose reach extended across the entire eastern seaboard, whose connections included judges and senators and police chiefs. But she was also running toward something: freedom, autonomy, the chance to be more than a beautiful possession. She was running for her baby. The thought steadied her hands. Lena mounted the bicycle and started pedaling, the rain still falling but lighter now, as if the storm was losing interest. The road stretched ahead of her, dark and uncertain, but it was hers to travel. Behind her, Dominic's estate disappeared into the darkness. She didn't look back. Heat. The bus station in Millbrook was exactly as depressing as she'd expected. Fluorescent lights, plastic chairs bolted to the floor, and a ticket counter staffed by a woman who looked like she'd given up on life around the same time the Berlin Wall fell. Lena bought her ticket with cash, keeping her head down, trying to look like just another tired traveler rather than a woman fleeing from danger. The next bus to Albany left in 40 minutes. She found a seat as the corner where she could watch both entrances and clutched her duffel bag like it contained everything that mattered. Because it did. The minutes crawled past. Every person who entered the station made her heart race. Every car that pulled up outside could be Dominic's people coming to drag her back. But gradually, impossibly, the 40 minutes passed without incident. When the bus finally arrived and Lena climbed aboard, settling into a seat near the back, she let herself breathe properly for the first time in hours. The bus pulled out of the station, leaving Millbrook behind, and she watched the darkness roll past the window, feeling something like hope beginning to bloom in her chest. She'd done it. The first step was complete. Albany passed in a blur. Another bus station, another ticket purchased, another few hours of nervous watching. Then Montreal, where the real test came, crossing the border without triggering any alerts Dominic might have arranged. But either his reach didn't extend this far, or he hadn't discovered her absence yet because the border guard barely glanced at her identification before waving her through. Canada welcomed her with early morning light and the promise of a fresh start. Toronto materialized from the highway like a city from a dream. Tall buildings and busy streets and thousands upon thousands of people who didn't know her, didn't know Dominic, didn't care about the complicated history she was trying to escape. She could disappear here. The community center was in a neighborhood that reminded her of where she'd grown up. Not wealthy, but not desperate, full of people just trying to get by. Lena stood outside for a long moment, gathering her courage, before pushing through the doors. The woman at the front desk had kind eyes and patience for Lena's stammered explanation that she needed help finding housing, finding work, finding a way to start over. They didn't ask questions she couldn't answer. They didn't demand explanations. They just helped. Within a week, Lena had a small apartment in a building that was clean if not luxurious, a job washing dishes at a restaurant that didn't ask about work visas, and an appointment at a prenatal clinic that operated on a sliding scale. She was building a life. It wasn't the life she'd imagined during those long afternoons staring out the window of Dominic's estate, but it was hers. She controlled her own schedule, chose her own clothes, decided what she ate and when she slept, and how she spent her limited free time. The poverty was familiar, almost comforting after months of abundance she'd never asked for. And slowly, carefully, she let herself believe she might actually be free. The baby grew inside her, making its presence known with waves of nausea that sent her running to the bathroom during her shifts, with the gradual thickening of her waist that forced her to buy secondhand clothes a size larger. Lena found herself talking to it sometimes, late at night in her small apartment, telling her child about the life they would build together. "You're going to have choices," she whispered, one hand on her stomach. "You're going to have freedom. I promise you that." The prenatal appointments became her anchor, a reminder that she was doing this for someone other than herself, that her flight wasn't just about escape, but about creating possibility. The nurse practitioner who saw her was gentle and thorough, never commenting on the absence of a partner or asking about the baby's father. Lena was grateful for the discretion. 3 months passed. Then 4. Lena's stomach rounded, her body changing in ways that were both frightening and miraculous. She worked her shifts, saved what little money she could, attended prenatal classes at the community center with other women who were also navigating motherhood alone. She was happy. Not the intoxicating, dangerous happiness she'd felt in Dominic's arms, but something quieter and more sustainable. The happiness of waking up and choosing how to spend her day. The happiness of knowing that she was building something real. But happiness, Lena was learning, was a fragile thing. The roses arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in her 5th month of pregnancy. Lena had just returned from her shift, exhausted and craving the terrible instant noodles that had become her comfort food, when she found the bouquet sitting outside her apartment door. Blood-red roses, exactly 2 dozen, arranged with the kind of precision that cost money. Her hands shook as she picked up the card tucked among the thorns. "Did you really think I wouldn't find you?" D. The world tilted. Lena grabbed the doorframe to steady herself, the roses falling from her nerveless fingers to scatter across the hallway floor. No, this wasn't possible. She'd been so careful, had covered her tracks, had built a new life far from anywhere Dominic would think to look. But of course he'd found her. She'd been naive to think otherwise. Dominic Varese didn't let things go, and he certainly didn't let people walk away from him. She wasn't a person to him. She was a possession that had been misplaced and now needed to be recovered. Lena stumbled into her apartment and locked the door, knowing even as she did that locks meant nothing to a man like Dominic. If he wanted to get to her, he would. The only question was when and how. The answer came 3 days later. She was leaving the restaurant after her shift, mentally calculating whether she could afford both groceries and the electric bill this month, when a car pulled up beside her. Black, expensive, familiar. The back window rolled down, and there he was. Dominic looked exactly as she remembered. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, the kind of controlled power that made people instinctively step back. But there was something new in his expression, something she couldn't quite read. "Get in the car, Lena." It wasn't a request. No. The word came out stronger than she felt. "We're having a conversation. You can have it here on the street where people might overhear things you'd prefer stayed private, or you can have it in privacy and comfort. Your choice." He was right. Lena could feel eyes watching from nearby buildings, see curtains twitching in windows. Making a scene would only draw attention she couldn't afford, and if Dominic decided to take her by force, there was nothing she could do to stop him. She got in the car. The interior smelled like leather and money and Dominic's cologne, a scent she'd tried hard to forget. He was sitting across from her, close enough to touch, separated by the small distance of luxury vehicles and the enormous gulf of everything she'd fled from. "You've been busy," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "New country, new name, new life. Very thorough. How did you find me?" Lena kept her hands on her stomach, a protective gesture she couldn't quite suppress. "Does it matter?" Dominic's eyes followed the movement, something flickering across his face. "I have resources. You knew that when you ran." "I didn't run. I left." Semantics. The driver was pulling into traffic, heading somewhere Lena didn't recognize. She thought about jumping out at a red light but dismissed the idea immediately. Even if she could move fast enough, which she doubted given her pregnancy, Dominic would catch her before she made it 3 steps. She was trapped. Again. "Where are we going?" "The Ritz-Carlton. I've taken the penthouse suite for the week." Dominic was still watching her with that unreadable expression. "We're going to talk, Lena, really talk. And then you're going to tell me what the hell you were thinking." The hotel materialized around them, all glass and marble and the kind of ostentatious luxury that Lena had once found appealing. Now it just reminded her of the cage she'd fought so hard to escape. Security guards nodded at Dominic as he guided her through the lobby with a hand on her lower back, proprietary and possessive. The penthouse was ridiculous. Multiple rooms, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that probably cost more than Lena would earn in a year. Dominic dismissed the staff with a gesture and turned to face her properly for the first time. That's when he saw. Lena watched his eyes drop to her stomach, saw the exact moment he registered the swell beneath her loose shirt, saw understanding crash over his features like a wave. "You're pregnant." His voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the storm beneath it. "Yes." "How far along?" 22 weeks. She saw him doing the math, saw the moment he reached the conclusion. His face went perfectly still, the way it did when he was processing something that threatened his careful control. "It's mine." Not a question. Lena met his eyes steadily. "Yes." For a long moment, Dominic just stared at her. Then he moved, crossing the distance between them in 3 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face with unexpected gentleness. "You're carrying my child, and you ran." His voice was low, dangerous. "You're carrying my child, and you were going to keep it from me. I was protecting us both." "From me?" The laugh that escaped him was sharp and bitter. "I would have given you everything, Lena. I would have protected you both with my life." "I know. That's what I was afraid of." The truth hung between them, that Dominic's protection was also possession, that his care came with conditions she couldn't accept, that loving him meant losing herself. But now there was a baby involved, and everything had just become infinitely more complicated. Dominic's hands were still framing her face, his touch gentle, despite the storm she could see building behind his eyes. Lena forced herself to remain still, to not flinch away from the contact she'd once craved, and now feared for entirely different reasons. "How long were you planning to keep this from me?" His voice was soft, which somehow made it more dangerous. "A year? 5 years? Were you going to let my child grow up not knowing who their father was?" "I was going to let my child grow up free." Lena stepped back, breaking the contact. Free from bodyguards and bulletproof cars, and a world where people solve problems with violence. That world is reality, Lena. Whether you're in Toronto or Timbuktu, it exists. The only difference is whether you're protected from it or exposed to it. Dominic moved to the bar and poured himself a drink, his movements controlled but his tension visible in the set of his shoulders. "And you chose exposure for our child. I chose normalcy. I chose a life where my baby doesn't grow up thinking armed guards and criminal empires are normal. Our baby." The correction was sharp. "And you don't get to make that choice alone anymore. Not when you're carrying my child." The possessiveness in his tone made Lena's stomach clench. This was what she'd feared, that the pregnancy would give Dominic an unbreakable claim, a permanent reason to exert control. She crossed her arms protectively over her stomach, a barrier between her child and the man who saw it as his. "I'm not going back to that estate," she said firmly. "I'm not going back to being your captive. You were never my captive." Dominic turned to face her, genuine confusion in his expression. "I gave you everything. Protection, luxury, anything you wanted, except freedom, except the right to leave, except my own life. I was keeping you safe. You were keeping me controlled." Lena felt tears threatening, but refused to let them fall. "There's a difference, Dominic. You just can't see it." He set down his glass with enough force to make the crystal ring. "What I see is the woman I care about putting herself and my child at risk because she has some romanticized notion of independence. You were washing dishes in a restaurant, Lena, living in an apartment the size of my closet, eating instant noodles and riding the bus. Is that the life you want for our baby? It's an honest life. Clean money. Real choices. Naive choices." Dominic crossed to the window, looking out over the Toronto skyline. "Do you know how easy it was to find you? 3 days. It took me 3 days to track you down once I realized you were gone. If I can find you that easily, so can my enemies." The words sent ice through Lena's veins. She'd been so focused on escaping Dominic that she hadn't considered the other dangers his world contained: rivals, enemies, people who might see her and the baby as leverage against him. "Then maybe you should have let me stay lost," she said quietly. "Maybe the baby and I are safer if no one knows we exist." "You think I could do that?" Dominic turned back to her, and the raw emotion in his face made her breath catch. "You think I could just forget about you? Pretend you didn't exist? I spent 8 months trying to make you happy, trying to give you everything, and you vanished like smoke. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" "You survived. You always do." "Surviving isn't living, Lena. You taught me that." The vulnerability in his admission caught her off guard. This wasn't the controlled, dangerous man who ruled his empire with calculated precision. This was something rawer, more human. It would be easier if she could hate him completely, if he was simply a villain to escape from. But Dominic had always been more complicated than that. "I never meant to hurt you," she said softly. "But I couldn't stay. Not and keep any part of myself intact. So instead you ran, across international borders while pregnant with my child, to a city where you knew no one and had no resources." Dominic's voice hardened again. "That wasn't brave, Lena. That was reckless. It was necessary. It was stupid." The anger flared hot and sudden in her chest. "Don't you dare stand there in your $1,000 suit and judge the choices I made to survive. You don't get to do that, Dominic. Not after you took every other choice away from me." "I never took anything from you." "You took everything." The words burst out of her, months of suppressed frustration finally finding voice. "You took my job, my apartment, my independence. You made me dependent on you for food, shelter, clothing, everything. And you did it so gradually that I didn't even notice until it was too late. That's not love, Dominic. That's control. It was protection. It was possession." Lena felt the tears finally spill over, hot against her cheeks. "And I won't let you do it to our child." The silence that followed was heavy and tense. Dominic stood frozen by the window, his expression cycling through emotions too quickly for her to track. Finally he spoke, his voice carefully measured. "Sit down, please." Lena hesitated, then moved to the couch. Her feet were aching from the long shift at the restaurant, and the pregnancy was making her tire more easily. She hated that her body was betraying her with weakness right when she needed to be strong. Dominic sat across from her, maintaining distance, his posture less aggressive than before. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its edge. "Tell me about the pregnancy. Have you been getting proper prenatal care?" The shift in topic threw her. Yes, there's a clinic. They've been monitoring everything." "And? The baby's healthy?" "As far as they can tell, yes. I'm due in early September." Something softened in Dominic's expression. "September. A summer baby." He paused. "Do you know if it's a boy or girl?" "I didn't want to know. I wanted to be surprised." "That's very you." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, always preferring mystery to certainty. "Sometimes certainty is overrated, and sometimes mystery is dangerous." The smile faded. Lena, I need you to understand something. The life I live, the world I operate in, it's not something I chose lightly, but it's also not something I can simply walk away from. I have responsibilities, obligations, people depending on me. I know that. Do you? Because you seem to think I can just turn it off, become someone different. But this is who I am. This is who I've always been. Lena met his eyes steadily. Then maybe we're incompatible. Maybe we should just acknowledge that and figure out how to co-parent from a distance. Co-parent from a distance? Dominic laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want me to be a weekend father? Send child support checks and birthday cards? I want you to respect that I need my own life. And I want my child to grow up knowing their father, to have the protection and opportunities that come with being mine. Being yours, Lena repeated. That's the problem, Dominic. You see everything in terms of ownership. I see everything in terms of protection. There's a difference. Is there? The question hung between them, unanswered because they both knew the truth, that in Dominic's world, protection and possession were often indistinguishable. A knock at the door interrupted the tension. Dominic rose smoothly, checking his phone before answering. A man in a dark suit entered, carrying several shopping bags that he set on the dining table before leaving without a word. What's that? Lena asked suspiciously. Dinner. I assumed you hadn't eaten. Dominic began unpacking containers of food. Thai cuisine from a restaurant Lena vaguely recognized as expensive and exclusive. You used to love Pad See You. I didn't know if your tastes had changed. The gesture was so unexpectedly thoughtful that it disarmed her. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just eat. You're too thin. They ate in silence, the tension easing slightly as hunger took precedence over argument. The food was delicious, far better than anything Lena had eaten in months, and she found herself eating more than she'd intended. Dominic watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. When did you start showing? He asked finally. Around 4 months. I've been wearing loose clothes to hide it. Why? Who are you hiding from? Everyone. You. Myself. The future I don't know how to plan for. Lena set down her fork. I've been terrified since I saw those 2 lines on the pregnancy test, Dominic. Terrified of what it meant, what you would do if you found out, what kind of mother I could possibly be when I can barely take care of myself. You would be a wonderful mother. The certainty in his voice surprised her. You're strong, resourceful, protective, everything a child needs, except stable, except secure, except sure that I can keep them safe. That's where I come in. Dominic leaned forward, his intensity focused entirely on her. I can give you security, Lena, real security, not just money, but protection, resources, everything you and the baby need. In exchange for what? My freedom? In exchange for letting me be a father to my child. In exchange for building something together instead of running away. Building what exactly? A bigger cage? Dominic's jaw tightened. Why do you insist on framing everything I offer as imprisonment? I'm trying to give you a good life. Your definition of a good life, not mine. Then tell me yours. What do you want, Lena? Specifically. The question forced her to articulate thoughts she'd only half formed. I want to make my own decisions, choose my own clothes, my own friends, my own schedule. I want to work if I want to work, or study, or just take care of the baby without someone watching over my shoulder constantly. I want to feel like a person, not a possession. Done. She blinked. What? Done. You can have all of that. Dominic pulled out his phone and started typing. I'll have my lawyers draw up an agreement. You get your independence, your choices, your freedom to move and work and live as you choose. In exchange, you agree to certain security measures for your protection and the baby's, and you allow me to be involved in the child's life. Just like that? You're just agreeing? I'm negotiating. There's a difference. He looked up from his phone. But yes, if those are your terms, I'll meet them, within reason. Lena's mind raced, trying to find the trap she was certain existed. What's within reason? You don't take unnecessary risks. You accept basic security, guards when needed, secure housing, that sort of thing. You consult with me on major decisions regarding the child's welfare. And you don't disappear again. And if I want to leave? If I want to move somewhere else? Then we discuss it like adults and come to an agreement. I'm not asking you to be my prisoner, Lena. I'm asking you to be my partner in raising our child. It was more than she'd expected, less than she'd feared. But Lena had learned to be wary of Dominic's gifts. They always came with strings, even when the strings weren't immediately visible. I want it in writing, she said carefully. Everything. My rights, your obligations, boundaries we both agree to respect. Fine. I'll have the papers drawn up within 48 hours. And I want my own lawyer to review them before I sign anything. A smile tugged at Dominic's mouth. Smart. I'll provide a list of reputable attorneys who aren't in my pocket. You can choose whichever one you trust. Why are you being so reasonable about this? The smile faded. Because I learned something during the months you were gone. I learned that controlling someone isn't the same as keeping them. And I'd rather have you as a willing partner than an unwilling captive. He paused. Even if it means giving up some control. Lena wanted to believe him. Part of her desperately wanted to believe that Dominic could change, that they could find a way to coexist that didn't require her to surrender her identity. But another part, the part that had lived in his estate for 8 months, knew that people didn't change their fundamental nature. I need time to think, she said finally. This is all happening too fast. You've had 5 months to think, but fine. Take a few days. Stay here in the suite. It's safer than your apartment anyway. I can't just abandon my job. I'll have someone call in for you. Medical leave. They can't argue with a pregnant woman needing rest. Dominic, Lena. He stood, moving closer, but stopping just outside her personal space. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to take care of you. There's a difference, and I need you to learn to see it. And I need you to learn that taking care of someone doesn't mean making all their decisions for them. Fair enough. He stepped back. The suite has 3 bedrooms. Take whichever one you want. There's a fully stocked kitchen, room service if you prefer, and the building has excellent security. I'll be staying here as well, but I won't crowd you. We can talk more tomorrow, after you've rested. It was a dismissal, gentle but firm. Lena stood, suddenly exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the past few hours. The pregnancy made her tired more easily, and the confrontation with Dominic had drained what little energy she had left. The master bedroom has the better view, Dominic added. But the guest room on the east side gets better morning light. Morning light sounds good. She found the room easily, tastefully decorated in neutral tones with a king-sized bed that looked incredibly inviting. Someone had already placed her duffel bag on a chair, and the sight of it made her stomach clench. How long had Dominic's people been watching her? Had they gone through her apartment? Too tired to worry about it now, Lena changed into the oversized t-shirt she slept in and crawled under the covers. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, ridiculously soft, and the mattress was the perfect combination of firm and comfortable. Despite her intention to stay awake and process everything, she was asleep within minutes. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee. For a disorienting moment, Lena forgot where she was, her hand automatically going to her stomach in the protective gesture that had become habit. The baby kicked in response, a flutter that still amazed her every time. Good morning. Dominic's voice came from the doorway, where he stood holding a tray. He was dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him, dark jeans and a black sweater that somehow made him look younger, less intimidating. I made breakfast, he continued. Or rather, I had breakfast made. There's prenatal vitamins on the tray, too. The doctor said you should be taking them. What doctor? The one I consulted about proper pregnancy nutrition. Don't worry, I didn't mention you specifically. Just asked general questions about what pregnant women need. Lena sat up, accepting the tray with a mixture of wariness and appreciation. Scrambled eggs, whole wheat toast, fresh fruit, orange juice. Simple, but perfectly executed. You didn't have to do this, she said. I wanted to. Dominic sat in the chair by the window, maintaining distance. I've been thinking about what you said last night, about control versus care. You're right that I've been overbearing. It comes from growing up in a world where showing weakness gets you killed. But you're not my enemy, and I need to stop treating you like you need to be managed. The admission surprised her. That's very self-aware of you. I've had 8 months to think about where I went wrong, to replay every conversation, every decision, trying to figure out when you stopped being happy with me. He looked out the window. I think I always knew, on some level. I just didn't want to acknowledge it because acknowledging it would mean changing, and change is dangerous in my world. Change is necessary in every world. Maybe, but it's harder for some people than others. He turned back to her. I've arranged for a lawyer to meet with you this afternoon. Rebecca Martinez. She specializes in family law and has no connection to me or my business. She'll review whatever agreement we draw up and make sure your interests are protected. Just like that? You're really going to give me legal protection against yourself? I'm really going to try to do this the right way. Dominic stood. Eat your breakfast. The vitamins are important. I'll be in the study if you need anything. He left before she could respond, closing the door softly behind him. Lena stared at the space where he'd been, trying to reconcile this version of Dominic with the man who had controlled every aspect of her life for 8 months. People could change, she supposed. The question was whether the change was genuine or just another form of manipulation. The eggs were perfect, the fruit was fresh, and the orange juice was freshly squeezed. Lena ate slowly, thinking about the future that was rushing toward her whether she was ready or not. In 4 months, she would have a baby. Dominic's baby. A child who would tie them together permanently, regardless of what agreements they signed or boundaries they established. The thought was terrifying and oddly comforting at the same time. After breakfast, Lena explored the penthouse suite more thoroughly. It was absurdly large, with 3 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a living area that could host a party, and windows that offered panoramic views of Toronto. Dominic's bedroom door was closed, but the study he'd mentioned was open, and she could see him inside, working on a laptop with the focused intensity she remembered. She wondered what he was working on. Business deals or criminal enterprises? With Dominic, the line between the two was often blurred. He'd explained it to her once during one of their late-night conversations, how legitimate business and organized crime were just different points on the same spectrum, how the only real difference was who wrote the laws and who broke them. Lena had found the philosophy troubling then and found it troubling now. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 o'clock. Dominic answered it, ushering in a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She introduced herself as Rebecca Martinez and immediately put Lena at ease with her straightforward approach. Mr. Verrez has explained the general situation, Rebecca said once they were seated in the living area. Dominic had made himself scarce, giving them privacy. But I want to hear your version. What exactly are you hoping to achieve with this agreement? Lena took a breath and laid it all out. The months of gradually increasing control, the escape, the pregnancy. Her fears about what Dominic would do if he had unlimited access to her and the baby. Rebecca listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. And what are your non-negotiables? Rebecca asked when Lena finished. What are the things you absolutely must have in any agreement? The right to work, if I choose to. The right to live where I want to live, within reasonable parameters. The right to make decisions about my own life and the baby's day-to-day care without needing his approval for everything. And what are you willing to give in exchange? I'll accept reasonable security measures. I'll keep him informed about major decisions. I'll make sure he has access to the baby and can be involved in their life. Lena paused. I'm not trying to cut him out. I'm just trying to make sure I'm not cut out of my own life. Rebecca nodded. That's a good framework. Let me talk to Mr. Verrez and see what he's willing to put in writing. I'll review anything he proposes and make sure it protects your interests. In the meantime, don't sign anything without my approval. Understood? Understood. The next few days fell into a strange routine. Lena stayed in the penthouse suite, recovering from months of stress and inadequate nutrition. Dominic was attentive but not smothering, checking on her regularly but giving her space. They ate meals together, talking carefully around the enormous issues that separated them, finding neutral ground in discussions about the baby. Have you thought about names? Dominic asked over dinner on the 3rd night. Some, nothing definite. I'd like to include my grandmother's name somehow, if it's a girl. Her name was Isabella. Isabella is beautiful. Lena found herself softening despite her best efforts. What was she like? Strong, principled. She ran a household with an iron fist, but also had the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. Dominic's expression turned nostalgic. She would have liked you, would have appreciated your stubbornness. I prefer to think of it as determination. Stubborn determination, then. He smiled. She had that too. used to tell me that a man who couldn't respect a strong woman wasn't worth respecting himself. She sounds wise. She was. I wish you could have met her. The moment of connection surprised Lena. It was easy to forget sometimes that Dominic was a person with a history and family and memories that shaped him. Easy to reduce him to just the dangerous crime boss who had controlled her life. But people were always more complicated than the roles they played. Rebecca presented the draft agreement on the 5th day. It was a thick document, full of legal language that made Lena's head hurt, but Rebecca walked her through it clause by clause. The agreement gave Lena significant autonomy, the right to work, to choose where to live within a defined safe zone that included major cities in the US and Canada, to make day-to-day decisions about the child's care without consultation. In exchange, she agreed to accept security personnel when Dominic deemed it necessary, to keep him informed about major life changes and to not interfere with his relationship with the child. There's a financial component too, Rebecca explained. He's offering a substantial monthly allowance separate from child support. You're not obligated to take it, but I'd advise you to. Having financial independence is important. I don't want his money. It's not about wanting. It's about protecting yourself and your child. Take the money, put it in an account, use it for the baby's future if nothing else. But don't refuse it out of pride. Lena reluctantly agreed to that provision. Rebecca had also negotiated several other protections, limits on how much surveillance Dominic could conduct, requirements that he respect her privacy, clauses that allowed her to modify the agreement if circumstances changed substantially. It's not perfect, Rebecca said honestly. No agreement can completely protect you from someone with his resources if he decides to violate it. But it's better than nothing, and it's legally enforceable. I'd recommend signing it. Dominic was waiting when Lena emerged from the meeting. His expression was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Well? He asked. It's fair. More fair than I expected. I told you I was willing to negotiate. You did. I just didn't believe you would actually follow through. Something flickered in his eyes. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment. I know I've given you reasons not to trust me. But I'm trying, Lena. I'm really trying to be better than I was. I know. That's why I'm going to sign it. The relief on his face was almost comical. Thank you. I promise you won't regret this. Don't make promises you can't keep. I'm learning not to. They signed the agreement the next morning, with Rebecca witnessing and both parties receiving copies. Lena felt the weight of it, this legal contract that bound her to Dominic in new, complicated ways. But it also felt like protection, like having something concrete to point to when boundaries were tested. So what happens now? She asked after Rebecca left. Now we figure out how to coexist, Dominic said. You need better housing than that apartment you were in. Something safe, comfortable, suitable for a baby. I can find my own place. I know you can. I'm offering to help, not to control. There's a difference. Lena studied him, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agendas. But all she saw was a man trying, genuinely trying, to navigate unfamiliar territory. Okay, she said finally, you can help, but I make the final decision. Agreed. Over the following weeks, they found a rhythm that almost felt sustainable. Dominic helped her find an apartment in a safe neighborhood with good schools nearby. 2 bedrooms, natural light, close to parks and grocery stores. He offered to pay for it, but Lena insisted on using part of the financial allowance Rebecca had negotiated, wanting to maintain the fiction of independence even as she accepted his help. The apartment was hers in a way the estate had never been. She chose the furniture, picked out paint colors, decided how to arrange each room. Dominic offered opinions when asked, but never insisted, respecting the boundaries they'd established. He also arranged for security, a discreet detail that watched from a distance but didn't intrude on her daily life. Lena hated the necessity of it, but couldn't argue with the logic. She was carrying the child of a powerful man with powerful enemies. Protection was prudent, not paranoid. The baby continued to grow, making its presence known, with increasingly insistent kicks and movements. Lena found herself talking to it more often, telling it stories about the life they would build together, the world they would navigate. And sometimes, late at night when sleep eluded her, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. Not a traditional relationship, certainly not the fairy tale she'd once dreamed of, but something functional. Something that gave their child two parents who respected each other, even if they couldn't quite trust each other completely. It was a fragile hope, built on shaky foundations and untested promises. But it was hope, nonetheless. That hope shattered on a Tuesday afternoon in late July. Lena was 7 months pregnant, her belly round and prominent, moving through her new apartment with the careful waddle that had replaced her usual grace. She'd just returned from a prenatal appointment. Everything was progressing normally, the baby was healthy and active, her blood pressure was good. The doctor had smiled and told her she was doing everything right. She was unlocking her apartment door, juggling her purse and the pregnancy books the clinic had given her, when she felt it. The prickle at the back of her neck that meant someone was watching. She turned, scanning the hallway, but saw nothing unusual, just the normal afternoon emptiness of a residential building. Still, the feeling persisted. Lena stepped inside quickly and locked the door behind her, then moved to the window. The street below looked normal, cars passing, people walking, the city carrying on with its daily rhythm. But there, parked across from her building, was a dark sedan that hadn't been there this morning. As she watched, a man in the passenger seat lifted binoculars to his eyes, pointing them directly at her window. Not Dominic's security. She knew what his people looked like: professional, discreet, trained to blend in. This was something else. Something wrong. Her phone was in her hand before she consciously decided to call him. Dominic answered on the second ring. "Lena? What's wrong?" "There's someone watching my apartment, a dark sedan across the street. It's not your people." "Get away from the window, now!" The command in his voice was absolute. She heard movement on his end, voices in the background issuing rapid orders. "Are you sure it's not my security detail?" "Positive. Your people don't use binoculars." "Fuck!" More voices, more movement. "Listen to me very carefully. Go to your bedroom, lock the door, and move the dresser in front of it. Stay away from windows. My people are already moving. They'll be there in 3 minutes." "Dominic, what's happening?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not taking chances. Do what I said. Now." Lena moved, her pregnant body protesting the sudden urgency. She made it to the bedroom and was struggling to move the heavy dresser when she heard the apartment door crash open. Her blood turned to ice. "Dominic! I'm here. I'm right here. Talk to me, Lena. What do you hear?" Footsteps, heavy. Multiple people, moving through her apartment with purpose. "They're inside," she whispered, pressing herself against the wall beside the window, her hand instinctively covering her stomach. "There's more than one. My people are 60 seconds out. You just need to hold on for 60 seconds. Can you do that?" "I don't have a choice." The bedroom door handle rattled. Then something heavy hit the door, making it shudder in its frame. They were trying to break through. "Dominic?" 30 seconds. You're going to be fine. I promise you, Lena. You're going to be fine." Another hit. The door splintered but held. Lena looked around desperately for anything she could use as a weapon. The lamp on the nightstand was ceramic and heavy. She grabbed it, yanking the cord from the wall, and positioned herself behind the door. The third hit broke the lock. The door swung open, pushing the dresser aside, and a man stepped through. He was big, heavily muscled, with the kind of face that had seen violence and inflicted more. His eyes swept the room and landed on Lena. "There you are," he said, his accent placing him somewhere in Eastern Europe. "The boss wants to talk to you." "I'm not interested in talking to your boss. Wasn't really a request, sweetheart." He moved toward her, and Lena swung the lamp with all her strength. It connected with his shoulder instead of his head, making him grunt but not stopping him. He grabbed her wrist, twisting until she dropped the lamp, then yanked her forward. "Let go of me!" Lena struggled, panic flooding through her. The baby. She had to protect the baby. "Stop fighting, and this goes easier for everyone." Then the window exploded inward in a shower of glass. 2 figures came through, Dominic's security team, moving with lethal efficiency. The man holding Lena released her to face the new threat, and she stumbled backward, her hands going to her stomach protectively. What followed happened too fast to process. Violence erupted in her bedroom, bodies colliding, the sound of impacts and grunts and things breaking. Lena pressed herself into the corner, making herself as small as possible, feeling the baby kick frantically inside her as if sensing the danger. It was over in less than 30 seconds. The intruder was on the floor, restrained and bleeding from a broken nose. One of Dominic's men, she recognized him as Marcus, the lead on her security detail, approached her carefully, hands visible and non-threatening. "Ms. Carter, are you hurt?" No, I'm okay. The baby... We need to get you out of here. Can you walk?" Lena nodded, though her legs felt like water. Marcus guided her out of the bedroom, stepping carefully over debris and the restrained intruder. The living room held 2 more men in various states of restraint, Dominic's security team efficiently securing them. "Vehicles ready," one of them said. "Clear path to the garage." They hustled her out of the apartment and down the back stairs to the underground parking garage. A black SUV was waiting, engine running, rear door open. Marcus helped her inside and the vehicle was moving before she even had her seatbelt fastened. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Safe house. Mr. Varese is meeting us there." The safe house turned out to be a luxury condo in a high-rise building with the kind of security that required retinal scans and biometric locks. Dominic was already there when they arrived, pacing the living room with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian. He ended the call the moment he saw Lena. "Are you hurt?" He crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands gentle as they framed her face, tilted her head to check for injuries. "Did they touch you? Did they hurt the baby?" "I'm okay. We're okay." "Dominic, what the hell was that?" "That was Viktor Kozlov sending me a message." His jaw was tight enough to shatter. "The bastard found out about you, about the baby. He's trying to use you as leverage." "Who is Viktor Kozlov?" "A problem I've been dealing with. A Russian syndicate trying to move into my territory. I thought I had it contained, but clearly I was wrong." Dominic's hands were still on her face, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that was almost frightening. "I'm so sorry, Lena. I'm so fucking sorry. This is exactly what I was trying to protect you from." The adrenaline was starting to wear off, leaving Lena shaky and cold. She sat down heavily on the couch, wrapping her arms around her stomach. The baby was still moving, little flutters that reassured her everything was okay. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now I end this. Permanently." The cold fury in Dominic's voice sent chills down her spine. Kozlov crossed a line. "You don't go after family, ever. That's a rule everyone understands, and he broke it." "By going after me?" "You're carrying my child. That makes you family." He sat beside her, close but not touching. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you trust me to keep you safe?" Lena thought about the question carefully. "I trust that you'll try. I trust that you have resources and people who can protect us. But Dominic, today proved that even with all your power, we're still vulnerable. That won't happen again. You can't promise that, not really. Not in the world you live in. Then I'll change the world." The statement was so absurd, so impossibly arrogant, that Lena almost laughed. But Dominic's expression was deadly serious. "I mean it, Lena. If the life I've built puts you and our baby in danger, then I'll tear it down and build something different. You can't just walk away from organized crime like it's a bad job. Watch me." Before she could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Sir, we have the interrogation results. You're going to want to hear this." Dominic stood, his expression shifting from concerned partner to dangerous crime boss in an instant. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me. I'll be back soon." He was gone before Lena could argue. She heard the lock click, sealing her into the safe house that was quickly becoming another cage. She moved to the window, looking out over Toronto's skyline, and wondered how many times she would have to flee before finding actual safety. The baby kicked, a strong jab just below her ribs. Lena placed her hand over the movement, feeling the life growing inside her. In 2 months, this child would be born into a world of violence and danger, caught between a mother who wanted freedom and a father who ruled through force. What kind of life was that for a baby? The thought was still circling through her mind when Dominic returned an hour later. His expression was grim, his knuckles bruised in a way that suggested he'd been personally involved in the interrogation. "Kozlov knows everything," he said without preamble. "About you, about the pregnancy, about this address. He has people in my organization feeding him information." "How is that possible? I thought you vetted everyone." "So did I. Apparently money talks louder than loyalty for some people." Dominic moved to the bar and poured himself a drink, downing it in one swallow. I'm handling it. The leaks will be plugged. But in the meantime, you can't stay here. Anywhere he knows about is compromised. So where do I go? Back to running? Back to hiding? No, you come with me. Back to the estate in New York. The suggestion made Lena's stomach clench. I can't go back there, Dominic. That place was a prison. That place is a fortress. It has security that would take an army to breach. You'd be safe there. You and the baby would be protected while I clean up this mess. For how long? A week? A month? The rest of my life? As long as it takes. He turned to face her. I know you hate the idea. I know it feels like going backward. But right now, your safety and the baby's safety are the only things that matter. Pride and independence don't mean shit if you're dead. The brutal honesty of the statement hit her like cold water. He was right, and she hated that he was right. Today had proven that her carefully constructed new life was built on sand, that a single determined enemy could bring it all crashing down. I want to negotiate terms, she said finally. If I'm going to the estate, I need guarantees, real ones. Name them. I want my own wing, separate from yours. Space that's mine where you don't come without invitation. I want internet access that you don't monitor. I want the ability to communicate with the outside world freely. And I want a timeline, a specific date when you'll have this situation resolved and I can leave again. Dominic considered this, his expression unreadable. You can have your own wing. You can have unmonitored internet access to reasonable sites. No posting about your location or situation. You can communicate with approved contacts, but I can't give you a timeline because I don't know how long it'll take to neutralize Kozlov completely. Then give me a maximum, 3 months. If you can't resolve this in 3 months, we revisit the arrangement. 6 months. 3 isn't enough time to dismantle an organization and ensure they don't regroup. 4 months. That takes us through the birth and the first month postpartum. After that, I need to know there's an exit. 4 months, Dominic agreed. And at the end of it, if the threat is neutralized, you can choose where you want to live. I won't fight you on it. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. Lena nodded her acceptance, and something in Dominic's expression softened. Thank you, he said quietly, for trusting me this much. I'm not trusting you. I'm accepting reality. There's a difference. I'll take what I can get. They left for New York that night, traveling in a convoy of 3 vehicles with enough security to invade a small country. The estate looked exactly as Lena remembered, imposing, beautiful, and utterly isolating. But this time, when she walked through the doors, it was with the knowledge that she had rights, boundaries, a contract that protected her autonomy even within Dominic's domain. The East Wing had been prepared for her, a suite of rooms including a bedroom, sitting room, and bathroom that had been redecorated since she'd left. The heavy masculine furniture was gone, replaced with softer pieces in colors she'd mentioned liking during their negotiations. Someone had even set up a nursery in the adjoining room, complete with a crib, changing table, and rocking chair. I had it done last month, Dominic said from the doorway. I was hoping you'd agree to come back eventually. Wanted it to be ready. Lena ran her hand over the crib railing, smooth wood that probably cost more than most people's cars. It's beautiful. Too much, but beautiful. Nothing's too much for my child. Our child, she corrected. And children need love and attention more than expensive furniture. They can have both. Over the following weeks, Lena settled into a routine that was strange but not entirely unpleasant. She had freedom within the estate, could walk the grounds, use the library, swim in the pool. Dominic kept his distance, respecting the boundaries they'd established, appearing only at meals or when she specifically requested his presence. But he was always there, a presence she felt even when she couldn't see him. Sometimes she'd catch glimpses of him through windows, working in his office, or training in the private gym. Sometimes she'd hear his voice as he conducted business, switching between English and Italian with fluid ease. And sometimes, late at night, she'd find herself thinking about the man he'd been during those early days in the diner, charming, vulnerable, human. She wondered if that version of him still existed somewhere beneath the crime boss exterior, or if it had been swallowed entirely by the world he inhabited. The baby's kicks grew stronger as August arrived, turning from flutters to definite movements that sometimes took her breath away. Lena found herself talking to the baby more, sharing her hopes and fears, trying to prepare for a future that felt increasingly uncertain. Your father is complicated, she said one afternoon, her hand on her belly as she sat in the nursery. He's dangerous and controlling, and sometimes I think he doesn't know how to love anything without owning it. But he's also trying. He's actually trying to be better. I don't know if that's enough, but it's something. Talking to yourself? Lena jumped, turning to find Dominic in the doorway. She hadn't heard him approach. Talking to the baby, she corrected. The books say they can hear voices in the womb, that it helps with bonding. What are you telling them about me? His tone was light, but she could see the genuine curiosity in his eyes. The truth, that you're complicated. That's diplomatic. He stepped into the room, moving slowly as if approaching a skittish animal. May I? He gestured to her stomach, and after a moment's hesitation, Lena nodded. Dominic knelt beside her chair, placing his hand gently on her belly. Almost immediately, the baby kicked, a strong movement that made his eyes widen. Was that was your child saying hello? Hello, Dominic said softly, speaking directly to her stomach. I'm your father. I know your mother's probably told you I'm difficult and overbearing, and she's right. But I want you to know that I'm going to do everything in my power to give you the best life possible. You're going to be safe, protected, loved. I promise you that. The intimacy of the moment made Lena's throat tight. This was the Dominic she remembered from those early days. Genuine, unguarded, showing emotions he usually kept locked away. The baby kicked again as if responding to his voice, and Dominic's smile was pure wonder. They're strong, he said, just like their mother. Let's hope they're smarter than both of us. That's a low bar to clear. He stayed kneeling there, his hand on her stomach, until the baby settled. When he finally stood, his expression had shifted to something more serious. I have news. About Kozlov. Lena's stomach tightened. What kind of news? We've located his base of operations. I'm moving against him tomorrow night. Moving against him how? The only way he'll understand. Force. Dominic's expression was grim. I need you to understand something, Lena. What I'm about to do, it's going to be violent. People are going to die, and I need to know that you can accept that because I'm doing it to protect you and our child. You're asking for my blessing to commit murder. I'm asking you to understand why it's necessary. Kozlov won't stop. He'll keep coming after you, after the baby, using you as leverage against me. The only way to ensure your safety is to eliminate the threat permanently. Lena wanted to argue, to find another way, to believe that violence wasn't the only solution. But she'd seen the men who broke into her apartment, had felt the very real terror of being hunted. Sometimes the world didn't offer clean choices, only impossible ones. Do what you have to do, she said finally, but don't tell me the details. I don't want to know. Fair enough. He moved toward the door, then paused. If something goes wrong tomorrow, nothing's going to go wrong. But if it does, there are instructions in my office, documents that ensure you and the baby are taken care of. The estate becomes yours, all of it, and there are legitimate business holdings that will provide income without any connection to the criminal side of things. Dominic, I'm being practical. This is dangerous, and I'd be stupid not to plan for all contingencies. He met her eyes. But I'm coming back, Lena. I promise you that. I'm coming back to meet our child. He left before she could respond, and Lena was alone with her fears and the baby growing inside her. She wanted to call him back, to tell him not to go, to find another way. But she knew there wasn't another way. Not in his world. The next 24 hours crawled past with agonizing slowness. Dominic was gone by the time Lena woke, the estate feeling empty despite the dozens of staff and security personnel. She tried to distract herself with books and movies and walks through the garden, but nothing could quiet the anxiety churning in her stomach. Night fell. Then midnight passed. Then 2 in the morning arrived with no word. Lena paced her room, one hand on her stomach, silently pleading with whatever force governed the universe to bring Dominic back safely. Not because she loved him, she still wasn't sure what she felt for him, but because their child deserved to have a father, and because somewhere beneath all the complications, she still cared what happened to him. The sun was starting to lighten the eastern sky when she heard vehicles approaching. Lena ran to the window and saw the convoy pulling through the gates. Her heart hammered as she watched the cars park, watched men emerge, watched for Dominic among them. There, he was climbing out of the lead vehicle, moving stiffly but under his own power. Alive. Lena didn't remember deciding to move. She just found herself running through the halls in her nightgown and bare feet, taking the stairs too fast for someone 7 months pregnant, emerging into the main foyer just as Dominic entered through the front door. He looked like hell. His suit was torn and bloody, his face bruised, exhaustion written in every line of his body. But he was alive and whole and there. "Lena?" He seemed surprised to see her. "What are you doing up?" "Waiting for you, you idiot!" The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she couldn't stop them. "Do you have any idea how worried I was? I told you I'd come back. And I told you not to make promises you can't keep." She was crying now, tears running hot down her face, and she wasn't even sure why. "You're bleeding." "It's not my blood, most of it anyway." Dominic swayed slightly, and Lena realized he was more hurt than he was admitting. "Marcus," she called to the security chief. "Get a doctor. Now." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're exhausted and injured and probably in shock." Lena took his arm, guiding him toward the sitting room. "Sit down before you fall down." To her surprise, he obeyed. Dominic sank onto the couch, and Lena sat beside him, her anger and fear and relief all tangling together into something she couldn't name. "Is it done?" she asked quietly. "Is Kozlov?" "Dead, along with most of his organization. The rest are scattered and won't be regrouping anytime soon." Dominic's voice was flat, emotionless. "You're safe now. You and the baby are safe." "At what cost?" "A cost I was willing to pay." The doctor arrived then, bustling in with a medical bag and efficiently ordering everyone out except Lena. She watched as he examined Dominic, cataloging injuries: bruised ribs, a deep cut on his shoulder that needed stitches, various contusions, and abrasions. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to make her stomach churn thinking about what he'd walked into. "You need rest," the doctor said finally. "Real rest. No work, no stress, just recovery." "Fine. Whatever you say." After the doctor left, they sat in silence, the early morning light filtering through the windows. Lena should go back to her room, give Dominic space to recover, but she found herself unable to move. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what?" "For coming back. For keeping your promise." She placed his hand on her stomach, where the baby was starting to wake and move. "For making it possible for our child to have a father." Dominic's expression crumbled. He pulled her close, burying his face against her shoulder, and she felt his body shake with silent sobs. The violence he'd committed, the lives he'd taken, the weight of protecting his family, all of it was crashing over him, and for once, he wasn't trying to maintain the mask of control. Lena held him, this complicated, dangerous, broken man who was the father of her child, and wondered if maybe, just maybe, they could find a way through this together. The days that followed felt suspended in time, caught between the violence that had just ended and the new life that was about to begin. Dominic recovered slowly, his body healing while something deeper shifted inside him. Lena watched the transformation with cautious curiosity, noting how he spent less time in his office conducting business and more time in the library reading books about fatherhood and child development. "Listen to this," he said one afternoon, looking up from a parenting guide. "It says babies can recognize their father's voice if he talks to them regularly before birth. We should be doing that more." Lena smiled despite herself. "We've been doing that. You talk to the baby every night." "I mean more structured. Stories, maybe. My grandmother used to read to me from this collection of Italian folk tales. I wonder if I still have it somewhere." "You're nesting." "I'm preparing. There's a difference." "Not much of one." She shifted on the couch, trying to find a comfortable position. At 8 months pregnant, comfort was increasingly elusive. "The baby's going to be here in 4 weeks. Are you ready for that?" The question made Dominic set down his book. "Honestly, I'm terrified. I've faced down armed men, negotiated with psychopaths, built an empire from nothing. But the idea of being responsible for a tiny human who's going to depend on me completely? That's the most frightening thing I've ever confronted." "At least you're honest about it." "Are you ready?" Lena considered the question carefully. "I don't think anyone's ever truly ready to become a parent, but I'm as prepared as I can be. I've read the books, taken the classes, set up the nursery. The rest is just showing up and doing the work." "You're going to be an amazing mother." "You keep saying that." Because it's true. You're strong, resourceful, protective. Everything a child needs. He moved to sit beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. I know I haven't given you many reasons to believe in me, but I want you to know something. I'm committed to this, to being a real father, not just a name on a birth certificate. Whatever it takes. Even if it means changing your life completely? Especially if it means that. Dominic reached for her hand, his touch tentative. I've been thinking about what you said, about the world I live in being too dangerous for a family. You were right. I usually am. So I'm making changes, real ones. He pulled out his phone and showed her a document. I've been working with attorneys to legitimize my business holdings. The criminal enterprises are being phased out or transferred to people who can handle them. Within 6 months, everything I control will be legal. Lena stared at the screen, trying to process what she was reading. Dominic, this is your entire empire. You're just walking away from it. I'm transforming it. There's a difference. He scrolled through pages of legal documents, corporate filings, business registrations. The real estate holdings were always legitimate. Same with the import businesses, once you remove the smuggling component. The restaurants, the construction companies, the waste management contracts, all of it can operate legally. It just won't be as profitable. And the people who work for you, the ones whose livelihoods depend on the criminal side, they're being offered positions in the legitimate operations if they want them. The ones who don't want to go straight are being given generous severance packages and connections to other organizations. No one's being abandoned. The scope of what he was describing was staggering. Dominic wasn't just making minor adjustments. He was completely restructuring his entire life, dismantling the empire he'd spent years building, all for the sake of their child. Why? She asked quietly. Why are you really doing this? Because I want my child to be proud of their father. Because I want to be able to answer honestly when they ask what I do for a living. Because I want to give them a life where they don't have to choose between family loyalty and moral integrity. He met her eyes. And because I want you to feel safe letting me be part of that life. Really part of it. Not just supervised visits and legal agreements. That's a lot of pressure to put on a baby who isn't even born yet. The baby isn't the pressure. It's the catalyst. For the first time in my life, I have something worth changing for. Someone worth being better for. His hand tightened on hers. 2 someones. Lena felt tears threatening and blamed it on pregnancy hormones rather than the genuine emotion his words stirred. This doesn't change everything between us. You know that, right? We still have a lot of complicated history. I know. I'm not expecting instant forgiveness or for you to suddenly trust me completely. I'm just asking for the chance to prove I can be the kind of man our child deserves. The kind of man you deserve. Before she could respond, the baby kicked hard enough to make her gasp. Dominic's hand was on her stomach immediately, feeling the movement. Strong kick, he said with a smile. Definitely takes after you. Or after you. You're the stubborn one. We're both stubborn. This kid doesn't stand a chance. The moment of levity eased some of the tension, and they sat together in comfortable silence, Dominic's hand on her stomach, feeling their child move and shift. It was the closest they'd been in months, not just physically, but emotionally. And Lena found herself wondering if maybe his transformation was genuine. If maybe, despite everything, they could find a way to build something real. The thought was interrupted by her phone ringing. Rebecca Martinez's name appeared on the screen. I should take this, Lena said, accepting the call. Rebecca, hi. What's up? Lena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Rebecca's voice was tight with concern. Are you at the Varese estate of your own free will? The question sent alarm bells ringing. Yes, of course. Why? Because I received a very concerning anonymous message suggesting you're being held there against your will. It included photos of the estate's security, guard rotations, entry points. Someone's been conducting surveillance. Lena's blood ran cold. When did you receive this? 20 minutes ago. I tried calling immediately, but it went to voicemail. The estate has signal dampening in some areas. Rebecca, who sent this? Do you have any idea? No, it came through an encrypted service, untraceable. But Lena, this is serious. If someone's watching the estate, gathering intelligence, I need to call you back. Lena ended the call and turned to Dominic, who was already on his feet, his expression deadly serious. He'd heard enough of the conversation to understand the implications. "Get Marcus," he said into his phone. "Now, we have a situation." Marcus arrived within minutes, and Dominic quickly briefed him on the situation. The security chief's expression grew increasingly grim as he listened. "We've had no indication of surveillance," Marcus said. "Our counter-surveillance sweeps are thorough. If someone's been watching us, they're using methods we haven't detected." "Then our methods aren't good enough." Dominic's voice was cold. "I want the entire security protocol reviewed and upgraded. Bring in outside consultants if you need to. And I want to know who sent that message to Lena's attorney and why." "On it." Marcus left, already issuing orders into his radio. Lena stood, pacing despite the awkwardness of her pregnant body. "This doesn't make sense. You eliminated Kozlov. His organization is scattered. Who else would target us?" "That's what we're going to find out." Dominic was typing rapidly on his phone, messages flying to various contacts. "But until we know, we need to assume the worst. You're not leaving the estate, period." "I wasn't planning to. I'm 8 months pregnant and the size of a house. I'm not exactly mobile." "I'm serious, Lena. Something about this feels wrong. The timing, the method, the fact that they sent it to your lawyer instead of directly to you. Someone's playing a game, and I don't like it." Over the next few hours, the estate transformed into a fortress. Additional security arrived, surveillance equipment was upgraded, every entry point was reinforced. Dominic's people swept the grounds repeatedly, looking for signs of observation or intrusion. They found nothing. That night, Lena lay in bed unable to sleep, listening to footsteps in the hallways as guards patrolled. The baby was restless too, moving constantly, as if picking up on her anxiety. She was debating whether to get up and walk around when her door opened quietly. "It's just me," Dominic said softly. "I saw your light was on. Can I come in?" "It's your house. It's your room. There's a difference." He entered anyway, closing the door behind him. He was dressed casually in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking more approachable than he did in his usual suits. "Can't sleep?" "The baby's doing gymnastics. I have to pee every 20 minutes. And someone's apparently watching the estate with unknown intentions. Sleep seems unlikely." "Mind if I stay?" "Just until you fall asleep. I promise I'll behave." Lena should say no. Maintaining boundaries was important, especially now when emotions were running high and fears were amplified. But the truth was, she didn't want to be alone. Not tonight. "Stay," she said, shifting over to make room. Dominic settled on top of the covers beside her, maintaining a careful distance. They lay there in the semi-darkness, listening to the sounds of the estate settling around them. "Tell me something true," Lena said finally. "Something you've never told anyone else." "Why?" "Because I'm scared, and distraction would be helpful, and because I want to know who you really are beneath all the layers." Dominic was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he spoke, his voice quiet in the darkness. "When I was 12, my parents were killed in what everyone said was a car accident, but I knew better. I saw the men following us that day. I saw my father's face when he realized what was happening, and I heard him tell my mother he was sorry, that he'd tried to protect us but failed." He paused. "The accident was staged by a rival family. My grandmother knew it too, but she couldn't prove it, couldn't fight back without starting a war she couldn't win. So we pretended to believe the lie." "Dominic, I spent the next 10 years preparing, learning, watching, building connections and power. And when I was strong enough, I went after every person who'd been involved in killing my parents. It took 3 years, but I found them all. And I made them pay." The revelation hung heavy in the air. Lena had known Dominic's empire was built on violence, but hearing the origin story made it real in a way that statistics and news reports never could. "How old were you when you finished?" she asked. 25. By then, I'd built enough power that no one could touch me. But I was also completely alone. My grandmother had died the year before. I had money and influence and fear, but no one who actually knew me. No one who cared whether I lived or died beyond what it meant for their business interests. That sounds lonely. It was. It is. He turned his head to look at her. Until you walked into that diner with your smart mouth and your refusal to be impressed by money or power, you saw me, Lena, really saw me. Not the boss or the empire or the fear, just Me. Do you have any idea how rare that is? So you decided to collect me like a rare artifact? I decided to hold on to the first real thing I'd found in my life. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and placed his hand on her stomach. The baby kicked immediately, a strong movement that made them both smile. And now we're creating something even more real. Someone who's going to carry part of both of us into the future. No pressure on the kid. All the pressure. They're going to have to put up with two incredibly stubborn parents who can't seem to figure out how to coexist without either fighting or running away. We're doing better than we were. The bar was underground. We didn't have far to go to improve. Lena laughed despite herself and felt some of the tension ease. They talked for another hour, trading stories and fear and hopes for the future, until finally Lena felt sleep pulling at her. Dominic stayed exactly where he was, his hand on her stomach, his presence somehow comforting rather than threatening. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows, and Dominic gone, though a note on the pillow said he'd stayed until dawn. The gesture touched her more than it probably should have. The morning brought new developments. Marcus appeared at breakfast with information that made Lena's stomach drop. We identified the source of the surveillance photos, he said, pulling up images on a tablet. They weren't taken recently. They're from 8 months ago, right before Ms. Carter left. Someone had been watching the estate back then and held on to the images until now. Why send them now? Lena asked. What's the point? That's what we can't figure out, unless… Marcus hesitated, looking at Dominic. Unless what? Dominic's voice was dangerous. Unless someone's trying to make you paranoid, to make you second-guess your security, divide your attention, keep you looking over your shoulder when you should be focused on other things. Like legitimizing my business operations, Dominic said slowly, like restructuring my entire empire. Someone who benefits from me staying in the criminal world would have every reason to want me distracted right now. Who knows about your plans? Lena asked. Too many people. The lawyers, the accountants, key personnel who need to be brought into the loop for the transition. Any one of them could have leaked information to someone who doesn't want to see me go legitimate. The realization shifted everything. This wasn't about kidnapping or ransom or attacking Dominic's family. This was about sabotaging his attempt to leave the criminal world behind. So what do we do? Lena asked. We don't take the bait. We maintain security, but we don't let fear control us. And we keep moving forward with the transition. Dominic's expression was determined. Whoever's behind this wants me to stay in the life. The best revenge is proving I can leave. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange limbo of heightened security and cautious normalcy. Lena continued her preparations for the baby's arrival, attending virtual prenatal appointments and reading every parenting book she could find. Dominic split his time between managing the business transition and hovering near Lena with increasing frequency as her due date approached. You know I'm not going to spontaneously explode, right? She said one afternoon, finding him watching her from the doorway for the 3rd time that day. The books say labor can start any time now. I want to be prepared. By staring at me? By being available if you need anything. What I need is for you to relax. You're making me nervous. Sorry. I'll try to hover less, obviously. That would be appreciated. But despite her words, Lena found his presence comforting. The estate felt safer with him nearby, and as her body prepared for labor with increasing Braxton Hicks contractions and general discomfort, knowing help was close provided peace of mind. Labor started on a Tuesday morning, 3 days before her official due date. Lena woke to cramping that was different from the practice contraction she'd been experiencing. Stronger, more purposeful. She lay still for a moment, timing them, and felt a flutter of excitement mixed with terror when they came at regular intervals. This was it. The baby was coming. Dominic, she called, knowing he was in the next room. He appeared so quickly he must have been awake and waiting. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I'm in labor. The color drained from his face. You're… now? Right now? Contractions are about 10 minutes apart. We have time, but we should probably head to the hospital soon. Hospital. Right. Okay. Dominic pulled out his phone with shaking hands. I'll call the doctor. Get the car ready. Make sure the room is prepared. Dominic, breathe. I am breathing. No, you're hyperventilating. Sit down before you pass out. He sat, looking so uncharacteristically rattled that Lena almost laughed. This was the man who'd faced down armed enemies without flinching, and he was coming apart because she was having a baby. "We practiced this," she reminded him. "You know what to do. Grab the hospital bag, call Dr. Morrison, and get the car ready. I'm going to change into something more comfortable than pajamas." "Right, yes, hospital bag." He stood, then sat again. "Where's the hospital bag?" "In the nursery closet, where we put it 2 weeks ago." "Nursery, closet, got it." Lena watched him sprint from the room and allowed herself a small smile despite the contraction building in her abdomen. If nothing else, seeing Dominic completely undone by impending fatherhood was entertaining. The drive to the hospital was tense but uneventful. Dominic had arranged for a private suite weeks ago, complete with security stationed discreetly outside. Dr. Morrison met them there, calm and competent, checking Lena's progress and confirming she was indeed in active labor. "Everything looks good," the doctor said. "You're at 4 centimeters. Could be a few more hours, could be faster. Every labor is different." It turned out to be somewhere in between. Lena labored through the afternoon and into early evening, Dominic staying by her side the entire time. He held her hand through contractions, brought her ice chips when she needed them, and provided a target for her increasingly creative insults as the pain intensified. "I hate you," she panted during a particularly brutal contraction. "This is your fault. Your stupid, overachieving sperm. I know. I'm sorry. You're doing amazing. Don't patronize me. I will end you." "Noted. Squeeze my hand as hard as you need to." "I'm going to break your fingers." "That's fine. I deserve it." By 8 o'clock that evening, Lena was fully dilated and ready to push. The next hour was a blur of pain and effort and medical personnel offering encouragement. Dominic stayed at her shoulder, whispering things she barely heard but found comforting anyway, his presence anchoring her through the hardest physical challenge of her life. And then, with one final push that took everything she had, their baby entered the world. The first cry was the most beautiful sound Lena had ever heard. Dr. Morrison lifted the baby, announcing, "It's a girl," before placing the tiny, perfect human on Lena's chest. Lena looked down at her daughter, their daughter, and felt the world reorganize itself around this new reality. Tiny fingers, a shock of dark hair, eyes scrunched shut as she wailed her displeasure at being evicted from her warm home. She was perfect and terrifying and completely dependent on them. "Hi, baby girl," Lena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We've been waiting to meet you." Dominic stood frozen beside the bed, staring at his daughter with an expression of absolute wonder. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "She's perfect." "She is. Do you want to hold her?" The nurse took the baby for weighing and measurements, then wrapped her in a blanket and brought her to Dominic. He accepted his daughter with trembling hands, cradling her like she was made of glass. "Isabella Grace," he said softly. "If that's still okay with you." Lena nodded, too emotional to speak. They discussed names over the past few weeks, finally settling on Isabella for Dominic's grandmother and Grace for Lena's mother. A bridge between both their families, both their histories. "Isabella Grace Varese Carter," Lena managed. A big name for such a small person. "She'll grow into it." Dominic couldn't take his eyes off his daughter. "She's beautiful, Lena, just like her mother." The hours that followed were exhausting and overwhelming and more joyful than Lena had imagined possible. Isabella nursed for the first time, slept in her father's arms, was examined and pronounced perfectly healthy. As night fell and the hospital quieted, Lena found herself watching Dominic hold their daughter, seeing in his face a tenderness she'd never witnessed before. "You're staring," he said without looking away from Isabella. "So are you. Can you blame me? I helped make this perfect tiny human. It's miraculous. It's biology. Biology doesn't explain why I feel like my heart is going to explode every time she makes a sound, or why I'm already planning how to protect her from every possible danger in the world. That's called being a parent. Welcome to the club." Dominic finally looked up at her. "Thank you for carrying her, for bringing her safely into the world, for giving me this gift. I don't have words for what it means." "You're welcome. But Dominic, this is just the beginning. The hard part comes next, actually raising her, keeping her safe and healthy and happy for the next 18 years. Minimum. I know, and I promise you I'm ready for it, whatever it takes. He stood carefully, bringing Isabella to the bed. We should let you rest. The nurse said she'll take Isabella to the nursery for a few hours so you can sleep. No, the word came out more sharply than Lena intended. I want her here, in the room with us. I need to know she's safe. Something in her tone must have conveyed the depth of her fear, because Dominic simply nodded. Then she stays. We'll take shifts watching her if you want. I'm not leaving anyway. True to his word, Dominic settled into the chair beside Lena's bed, Isabella sleeping peacefully in the bassinet between them. Every few minutes, one or both of them would lean over to check that she was still breathing, still real, still theirs. In the quiet darkness of the hospital room, Lena felt something shift inside her. For months, she'd been fighting against Dominic, against his control, against the life he represented. But looking at him now, watching their daughter with such fierce devotion, she realized that maybe they could build something new. Not the toxic dynamic of possession and escape, but something more balanced, something real. It wouldn't be easy. They had too much history, too many complications, too many fundamental differences in how they viewed the world. But for Isabella's sake, and maybe, just maybe, for their own, it was worth trying. Dominic, she said quietly, I want to renegotiate our agreement. His head snapped up. What? Why? Because circumstances have changed. Because Isabella deserves to have both her parents present and engaged, not following some legal contract that keeps us at arm's length. Because I think we can do better than what we settled for. What are you proposing? I want us to try, really try. Not as adversaries negotiating terms, but as partners figuring out how to raise our daughter together. Living in the same house, making decisions together, building something that looks like a family, even if it doesn't fit the traditional mold. Dominic's expression was unreadable. Are you sure? A week ago you were insisting on separate wings and strict boundaries. A week ago I hadn't held our daughter yet, hadn't seen you with her. Things are different now. They are. He moved to sit on the edge of her bed, close enough to take her hand. I want that too, Lena. More than I can express. But I need you to know that I'm still committed to changing my life. To being someone Isabella can be proud of. That doesn't change. I know, and I'm going to hold you to it. Good. I'd expect nothing less. Isabella stirred in her bassinet, making a soft sound that had both parents immediately on alert. But she settled again, one tiny fist escaping the blanket to wave aimlessly in the air. We're going to figure this out, Lena said with more confidence than she felt. One day at a time. One day at a time, Dominic agreed, squeezing her hand. Together. The first weeks with Isabella were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and the steep learning curve of new parenthood. Lena had read all the books, attended all the classes, but nothing truly prepared her for the reality of being responsible for another human being 24 hours a day. Dominic surprised her by being genuinely helpful rather than just hovering. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the halls at 3 a.m, soothing a crying baby, and somehow managed to function on even less sleep than Lena while still running his increasingly legitimate business empire. How are you not dead? Lena asked one morning, finding him in the nursery with Isabella, both of them wide awake at 5 a.m. You slept maybe 2 hours last night. I functioned on less during business negotiations that lasted days. He adjusted Isabella in his arms, supporting her head with the practiced ease he'd developed quickly. Besides, I don't want to miss anything. She changes every day. Gets a little bigger, a little more alert. If I sleep, I might miss something important. You're going to burn out. So will you if you don't go back to bed. I've got her. Sleep while you can. Lena wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. She stumbled back to bed and was asleep within minutes, trusting Dominic with their daughter in a way that would have seemed impossible just months ago. The trust was still new, still fragile, but it was growing. Dominic kept his promises about the business transition, showing her financial reports and legal documents that proved the criminal operations were being systematically dismantled. He'd brought in outside consultants to help restructure everything, ensuring the legitimate businesses could stand on their own without the illegal revenue streams that had once supported them. It's actually more profitable than I expected, he told her one afternoon while Isabella napped between them on the couch. Turns out when you're not paying protection money or bribes or covering up criminal activity, The profit margins improved significantly. Who would have thought honesty could be lucrative? Revolutionary concept, I know. He reached over to adjust Isabella's blanket. My accountant is thrilled. Says for the first time in his career, he doesn't have to maintain 2 sets of books. How are your people taking the transition? Better than expected. Most of them are relieved, actually. The ones who wanted to stay in the life have moved on to other organizations with generous recommendations. The ones who stayed are building something they can be proud of, something they can tell their families about without lying. The change in Dominic extended beyond just business. Lena noticed he smiled more, seemed lighter somehow, as if shedding the weight of the criminal empire had lifted a burden she hadn't fully recognized he was carrying. He spent hours playing with Isabella, making ridiculous faces to coax smiles from her, narrating everything he did in a gentle voice that bore no resemblance to the cold tone he used to use with his subordinates. "You're good at this," Lena observed, watching him bathe Isabella with careful attention. "The father thing. I'm terrified I'm going to break her." "You're not going to break her. You're doing great. She's so small, so fragile. How are humans not extinct when we start out this vulnerable?" "We have parents who protect us. Usually." Lena paused. "Dominic, I've been thinking about something. About us." His hand stilled in the water. "What about us?" "We're living together, raising Isabella together, functioning like a family in every way except one. And I keep wondering if maybe we should make it official." "Official how?" "I don't know. Maybe not marriage, that feels like too much pressure. But something more than just co-parenting. Something that acknowledges we're building a life together, not just sharing space for Isabella's sake." Dominic lifted Isabella from the bath, wrapping her in a soft towel. "What changed? A month ago you were still insisting on separate wings and independence. A month ago I was still fighting against the past. But I'm starting to think maybe I should be fighting for the future instead." Lena took Isabella, holding her close. "You've changed, Dominic, really changed. And I think I need to acknowledge that instead of waiting for you to revert to who you were, I could still revert. Change is hard, and I'm learning as I go. So am I. We both are. But maybe that's okay. Maybe perfect isn't the goal. Maybe good enough is actually good enough." Dominic reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Lena's ear, the gesture tender and intimate. "I want more than good enough with you. I want extraordinary. I want the kind of partnership where we challenge each other to be better, where we build something that's greater than the sum of its parts." That's very poetic for a former crime boss. "I've been reading, trying to expand my emotional vocabulary." He smiled. "The parenting books all say it's important to express feelings clearly." "And what are your feelings? Clearly." "I love you." The words were simple but weighted with meaning. "I think I've loved you since that first night in the diner when you laughed at my expensive suit and treated me like a regular person instead of someone to fear. I loved you when you ran, even though it nearly destroyed me. And I love you now, watching you be the amazing mother I knew you'd be. I love you, Lena, completely and without reservation." The declaration hung in the air between them. Lena's heart was racing, her mind cycling through years of complicated history and the fragile present they'd built. "I don't know if I love you," she said honestly. "I care about you. I respect what you're becoming. I trust you with our daughter. But love? That feels like something I need to be sure about before I say it." "That's fair. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." "You say that now, but what happens when I'm difficult? When I push back against decisions or insist on doing things my way? Then we negotiate. We compromise. We figure it out together like adults." Dominic took Isabella back, cradling her against his chest. "I'm not asking for perfect agreement on everything. I'm asking for partnership, for the chance to prove that we can build something real." Before Lena could respond, her phone rang. Rebecca Martinez's name flashed on the screen, and Lena felt her stomach tighten. Calls from her attorney were rarely social. "Rebecca, hi. What's going on?" "Lena, I have news. We identified who sent those surveillance photos." Rebecca's voice was tight with controlled anger. "It was Martin Chen." Lena's mind raced, trying to place the name. "Who's Martin Chen?" "Your former attorney, the one who drafted your initial agreement with Dominic before you came to me." The revelation hit like ice water. Martin Chen had been the lawyer Dominic recommended when they first negotiated terms. She'd only worked with him briefly before switching to Rebecca, uncomfortable with how closely aligned he seemed with Dominic's interests. Why would he do that? Lena asked. Money, most likely. Someone paid him to create chaos, to make you doubt the security at the estate and question whether you were safe. We're still tracking down who hired him, but preliminary evidence suggests it was someone within Dominic's former organization. Someone who didn't want to see him go legitimate. Dominic had gone very still, listening to the conversation. When Lena ended the call, he was already on his phone, issuing rapid orders. I want Chen found, now, and I want to know everyone he's been in contact with for the past 6 months. Someone in my organization betrayed me, and I want names. Dominic, this ends today. His voice was cold, the crime boss emerging beneath the doting father. No one threatens my family and walks away. No one. Wait, just wait. Lena placed a hand on his arm. You're doing it again. Reverting to violence and control as your first response. This is exactly what you're supposed to be moving away from. Someone tried to manipulate you, to make you afraid, to sabotage everything we're building. I'm supposed to just let that go? I'm saying there are legal ways to handle this. We have evidence of Chen's involvement. We can report him to the Bar Association, pursue criminal charges if warranted. We don't need your old methods. Dominic's jaw clenched, the internal struggle visible on his face. Finally, he took a breath and nodded. You're right. I'm sorry. Oh, old habits. Old habits that you're working to change. So let's do this the right way. Legal, above board, proving that you really have moved on. Okay, legal. I can do legal. He made another call, this time to his attorneys, explaining the situation and asking them to pursue appropriate legal action. When he hung up, he looked exhausted. It's harder than I thought, choosing the legal path when every instinct says to handle it the old way. I know, but it's worth it, for Isabella's sake, for all our sakes. The investigation into Martin Chen unfolded over the following weeks, revealing a network of people within Dominic's former organization who had been working to sabotage his transition to legitimacy. Some were motivated by money, others by loyalty to the old ways, still others by the simple fact that they profited from the criminal enterprises Dominic was dismantling. Throughout it all, Dominic remained committed to handling everything legally. He cooperated with authorities, provided evidence when requested, and resisted every urge to solve problems with intimidation or violence. Lena watched him struggle with it, saw the effort it took to choose a different path, and felt her respect for him deepen. It's like fighting with one hand tied behind my back, he admitted one night after a particularly frustrating day of legal proceedings. Everything takes so much longer, requires so much more patience. Welcome to how normal people live, where actions have consequences and you can't just make problems disappear with money or threats. I'm starting to understand why normal people are always so stressed. We manage, usually with wine and therapy. I should look into both of those. Isabella chose that moment to wake from her nap, her cries echoing through the nursery monitor. Dominic was on his feet immediately, heading to get her before Lena could move. I've got her. You rest. Lena watched him go, then settled back against the couch cushions, marveling at how much had changed in just a few months. The man who'd once controlled her every move was now letting legal processes dictate his actions. The crime boss who'd ruled through fear was now getting up in the middle of the night to soothe the crying baby. People could change. She was watching it happen in real time. 2 months after Isabella's birth, the legal situation finally resolved. Martin Chen was disbarred and facing criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy. The people within Dominic's organization who'd been working against him were either in custody or had fled, their influence neutralized. And Dominic's business empire was fully legitimate, every enterprise operating above board and paying taxes like any normal corporation. It's done, Dominic announced, coming home from a final meeting with his attorneys. Everything's clean, legal, boring even. Boring is good. Boring is safe. Boring is also surprisingly profitable. Who knew legitimate business could actually work? Literally everyone who isn't a criminal. Fair point. He crossed to where Lena sat with Isabella, dropping a kiss on his daughter's head before settling beside them. I have something for you, a proposal. If this is about marriage again, it's not about marriage. Not exactly. He pulled out a folder, handing it to her. It's about partnership. Real partnership. Lena opened the folder and found herself looking at legal documents. A new agreement, far more comprehensive than the one they'd originally signed. But as she read through it, she realized it wasn't about control or boundaries. It was about building something together. The documents established a joint trust for Isabella, with both parents having equal say in major decisions. They outlined shared custody that wasn't really custody because they were living together, but provided protection if circumstances changed. They detailed financial arrangements that gave Lena real independence while acknowledging their shared responsibility for Isabella. But the most surprising element was a business proposal. Dominic was offering her a partnership in a new venture, a foundation dedicated to helping women in situations like the one she'd been in when they met. Women trapped by poverty, by abusive relationships, by circumstances they couldn't control. The foundation would provide housing, job training, legal assistance, everything needed to build a new life. "You want me to run a foundation?" Lena asked, looking up from the documents. "I want us to run it together. You bring the lived experience, the empathy, the understanding of what these women need. I bring the resources, the connections, the ability to navigate bureaucracy and funding. Together, we could actually make a difference." "This is a lot of money, Dominic, millions of dollars." "I have millions of dollars, and for the first time in my life, I want to use them for something that actually matters, something that creates good in the world instead of just accumulating power." Lena felt tears threatening. This wasn't just a business proposal. This was Dominic acknowledging her value beyond being the mother of his child, offering her purpose and partnership and the chance to help others. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it. We don't have to decide today or tomorrow or even next month. Take your time. Read through everything. Talk to Rebecca if you want. Just consider it." "I will. I'll definitely think about it." Isabella gurgled between them, grabbing at her father's finger with surprising strength. Dominic lifted her up, holding her against his shoulder, and Lena was struck by how natural it looked. This dangerous man who'd once ruled through fear, now reduced to happy servitude by a 3-month-old baby. "She's getting so big," Lena observed, "already outgrowing her newborn clothes. Growing too fast. I want her to stay small and perfect forever." That's not how children work. I'm learning that, along with approximately 7,000 other things I didn't know about being a parent. He settled Isabella in her bouncer, watching her kick her legs with clear delight. "I never thought I could have this. A family. A real family. Not just an organization bound by fear and mutual benefit." "Is it what you expected?" "It's better and harder and more terrifying than anything I could have imagined, but I wouldn't change it for anything." He turned to face Lena fully, "Including you, especially you. You've made me better, Lena, challenged me to be more than I was. I know I wasn't ready for that when we first met. But I'm ready now." "Ready for what?" "Ready to ask you properly." Dominic reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I'm not doing this the traditional way because nothing about us has been traditional. But Lena Carter, mother of my child, my partner in rebuilding my life, the woman who saw through all my defenses and demanded I be better, will you marry me?" Lena stared at the ring box, her mind racing. Marriage. The ultimate commitment, the thing she'd been avoiding even as they built a life together. Part of her wanted to say no, to maintain the independence she'd fought so hard to reclaim. But another part, the part that had watched Dominic transform himself, that had seen him choose legal processes over violence, that recognized the genuine love in everything he did for their daughter, that part wanted to say yes. "I need time," she said finally. "This is huge, Dominic. It's not something I can decide in a moment." "I know. Take all the time you need. The ring will be here whenever you're ready to answer." He set the box on the table between them. "I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not pressuring you. I just wanted you to know that when you're ready, I am too." The ring box sat on Lena's nightstand for 3 weeks, a constant reminder of the question she hadn't answered. She found herself looking at it at odd moments, picking it up, opening it to look at the simple but elegant diamond inside, then setting it down again without putting it on. Rebecca advised her to take her time, to be certain before making such a permanent commitment. Her few friends from the community center back in Toronto expressed concern that she was rushing into something with a man who'd controlled her before. Even the prenatal group she'd attended remotely had opinions about whether marriage was the right choice. But the person whose opinion mattered most was the one Lena saw in the mirror every morning. And that person was genuinely conflicted. The turning point came on a random Thursday afternoon. Lena was folding laundry while Isabella played on a blanket nearby when Dominic appeared in the doorway, his phone in hand and his expression serious. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to hear me out before you respond." Lena's stomach clenched. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but I got a call today from Marco Santini. He's trying to restart his operation in Philadelphia and wanted to know if I'd be interested in partnering with him. Significant money, minimal risk, using my existing infrastructure and connections." "What did you tell him?" "I told him no. Unequivocally, permanently no. And I wanted you to know about it because transparency is important and because I want you to understand that I'm making these choices consciously. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. Because the life I'm building with you and Isabella is worth more than any amount of money or power." Something clicked into place inside Lena. This was what she'd been waiting for. Evidence that when faced with real temptation, Dominic would still choose their new life over his old one. It was one thing to talk about change, another to actually make it when the opportunity for easy money presented itself. "Thank you for telling me," she said quietly. "Always. No secrets, no hidden agendas. That's the foundation we're building on." Lena set down the laundry, crossed to him, and kissed him. Not the careful, tentative kisses they'd shared since Isabella's birth, but a real kiss full of emotion and promise and possibility. When they finally broke apart, Dominic looked dazed. "What was that for?" "For being who you are now, for choosing us, for proving that change is real and sustainable, not just performance." She took his hand. "Ask me again." "Ask you what?" "You know what." Understanding dawned in Dominic's eyes. He took both her hands in his expression tender and vulnerable in a way that still surprised her sometimes. "Lena Carter, will you marry me?" "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you." The joy on his face was almost comical. He picked her up and spun her around, careful not to disturb Isabella, but unable to contain his happiness. When he set her down, he was already reaching for the ring box, pulling out the diamond and sliding it onto her finger. "I love you," he said again. "I know you're not ready to say it back, and that's okay. I love you enough for both of us right now." But the truth was, Lena realized as she looked at the ring sparkling on her finger, she did love him. Maybe not the same way he'd loved her from the beginning, and maybe not with the uncomplicated certainty of fairy tales. But she loved the man he was becoming, the father he was to Isabella, the partner he was choosing to be. "I love you too," she said, watching his expression transform. "I think I have for a while. I just needed to be sure it was real, that we were building something that could last." "We are. I promise you, Lena, we are." They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the estate, with only close friends and family present. Rebecca served as Lena's maid of honor, standing witness to the union she'd once thought impossible. Marcus attended with his wife, along with several of Dominic's people who'd made the transition to legitimate business and wanted to celebrate their boss's new beginning. Isabella, now 6 months old and impossibly charming, stole the show by grabbing at Lena's veil during the ceremony and making everyone laugh. It was perfect in its imperfection, a symbol of the unconventional family they were building. After the wedding, they settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Lena officially took over as director of the foundation Dominic had proposed, discovering a passion for advocacy work she'd never known she possessed. Working with women who'd escaped situations similar to hers gave purpose to everything she'd survived, transforming trauma into meaningful action. Dominic continued transforming his business empire, expanding the legitimate enterprises and maintaining the boundaries he'd established between his past and present. He made mistakes sometimes, fell back into old patterns of control, but he always caught himself and apologized. The change wasn't perfect, but it was real and ongoing. Isabella grew from baby to toddler, developing a personality that was equal parts her mother's determination and her father's intensity. She was fearless and curious and utterly loved by parents who'd traveled an impossible road to build the family she deserved. 1 year after the wedding, Lena found herself standing at a fundraising gala for the foundation, watching Dominic work the room with natural charm that was now dedicated to helping others rather than building criminal empire. He caught her eye across the room and smiled, a private moment of connection that acknowledged everything they'd overcome to reach this point. Penny for your thoughts? Rebecca appeared beside her with champagne. Just thinking about how far we've come. A year and a half ago, I was running from him. Now I'm running a foundation with him. Life is strange that way, full of unexpected transformations. Do you think it'll last? The change? I mean, the legitimate business, the foundation, all of it? Honestly, I think Dominic would burn his entire empire to the ground before he'd risk losing you and Isabella. That's real motivation for change, the kind that lasts. Rebecca clinked her glass against Lena's. Besides, I've seen the quarterly reports. Legitimate business is working for him. He's actually happier than he was running criminal operations. He says the same thing, that being able to sleep at night without worrying about federal investigations or rival organizations is worth the decreased profit margins. Smart man. He finally figured out what actually matters. As if summoned by their discussion, Dominic appeared with Isabella on his hip. Their daughter was wearing a tiny version of Lena's dress, giggling at something her father had said. "Mama," Isabella reached for Lena, who took her with practiced ease. "Having fun with Daddy?" "We've been networking," Dominic said with mock seriousness. "Isabella's very popular with donors. She's already secured 3 large commitments just by being adorable. That's my girl, using her powers for good. Just like her mother." He slipped an arm around Lena's waist, pulling her close. "I have news. The paperwork finally cleared on the Philadelphia expansion. The foundation is officially opening a second location." "Dominic, that's incredible. Do we have the funding secured?" "Fully funded for the first 2 years. After that, we'll need to fundraise, but I'm confident we can make it work." He kissed the top of Isabella's head. "We're helping people, Lena. Really helping them. Making a real difference." "We are. And it feels amazing." The gala continued around them. Donors mingling, staff coordinating, success stories being shared by women the foundation had helped. This was their legacy now, not criminal enterprises or accumulated power, but genuine positive impact on people's lives. Later that night, after Isabella was asleep and the event had ended, Lena and Dominic sat on the terrace overlooking the estate grounds. The same grounds she'd fled across in the rain 18 months ago, desperate for freedom. Now she was here by choice, building a life she'd never imagined possible. "Do you ever regret it?" Dominic asked quietly. "Staying with me instead of running again when you had the chance?" "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have looked like if I'd stayed in Toronto, raised Isabella alone, never given you another opportunity. But regret? No. This is harder in some ways, more complicated, definitely messier, but it's also richer, more meaningful. We're building something real together, and that's worth the complications. I regret how we started, the control, the possession, all the ways I tried to keep you without understanding that you can't keep someone who doesn't want to stay. But you learned. You changed. That's what matters. Because you demanded it. Because you refused to settle for less than you deserved." He took her hand, running his thumb over her wedding ring. "I'm a better person because you wouldn't let me be anything less. You're a better person because you chose to be. I just provided motivation. Essential motivation." He pulled her close, and they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the moon rise over the Hudson Valley. Somewhere inside, Isabella slept peacefully in her nursery, unaware of the complicated history that had brought her parents together. She would grow up knowing only that her father ran successful businesses and her mother helped women in crisis. She would know safety, stability, and love that came without conditions or control. She would have choices, real choices, about her education, her interests, her future. Everything Lena had promised her that night in the Toronto apartment when she was still unborn, and the future was uncertain. "I've been thinking," Lena said, breaking the silence, "about expanding my role at the foundation, maybe going back to school, getting a degree in social work or nonprofit management, making this a real career instead of just something I fell into. I think that's an excellent idea. You're a natural at it, and formal training would only make you more effective." Dominic shifted to look at her. "Whatever you need to make it happen, time, resources, childcare for Isabella, just say the word." "Just like that? You're not worried about me being too independent? Lena, your independence is what makes you extraordinary. Why would I want to limit that? He smiled. Besides, I learned my lesson about trying to control you. It doesn't work, and it nearly cost me everything. You really have changed. I'm still changing. Every day I'm learning how to be better. For you, for Isabella, for myself. The work never stops. Good. Because the minute you stop trying is the minute we start having problems. Noted and accepted. They talked for another hour, planning the foundation's expansion, discussing Isabella's upcoming first birthday party, debating whether they were ready for another child someday. Normal conversations between partners building a shared future, remarkable only in how unremarkable they'd become. When they finally went inside, Lena paused at Isabella's nursery door. Their daughter was sleeping peacefully, one arm thrown above her head, her expression content. The room was different from the one Dominic had prepared in the estate months ago. Lena had redecorated, adding her own touches, making it truly theirs rather than his. She's perfect, Dominic whispered from behind her. She is, and she's going to have the childhood we never did. Safety, stability, parents who work together instead of tearing each other apart. She's going to have everything we can give her, and when she's old enough to understand, we'll tell her our story. All of it, including the complicated parts. She'll probably write a therapy-heavy memoir someday. Probably. But she'll know she was loved. Absolutely, unconditionally loved. That's more than many people get. They stood together watching their daughter sleep. Two people who'd started as adversaries and become partners, who'd fought through impossibility to build something real. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no perfect happy ending where all problems disappeared, but it was honest and hard-won and theirs. Lena thought about the woman she'd been when she first met Dominic, broke, struggling, dreaming of a life beyond the diner's fluorescent lights. That woman would be shocked by where she'd ended up, married to a former crime boss, running a foundation, raising a daughter in an estate she'd once fled like a prisoner escaping confinement. But that woman had also been braver than she'd known, strong enough to run when running was necessary, strong enough to stay when staying became possible, strong enough to demand change and wait for it to actually happen. Come to bed, Dominic said softly, taking her hand. Isabella will be up in a few hours anyway. We should sleep while we can. Lena let him lead her away from the nursery, down the hallway that had once felt like a maze of control and now felt like home. They'd built this together, not just the house or the foundation or the legitimate business empire, but the trust that made it all possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The foundation would need attention, Isabella would need care, the business would require decisions and problem solving. But they would face it together, partners in every sense of the word, building a future neither of them could have imagined when they first met in that rundown diner. The rain had been falling that night too, Lena remembered. Different rain, different city, different versions of themselves, but the same two people underneath finding their way toward each other through all the complicated circumstances that should have kept them apart. Sometimes the most unlikely paths led to the most meaningful destinations. Sometimes prison became home. Control transformed into partnership. And running away was just the first step toward running toward something better. Lena looked at her sleeping daughter one more time before closing the nursery door. Isabella Grace Varese Carter, product of impossible circumstances and unexpected love, sleeping peacefully in a home built on transformation and hope. This was their story. Messy, complicated, imperfect, and utterly real. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.